That freedom of being an entrepreneur and just like having no boss and stuff like that, the second you take venture money, that goes out the window and it feels very different. But what happened is we went to someone who kind of was an advisor and had taken a company public and stuff like that. They basically the only person we knew locally. And we said, hey, do you think we could sell the company? And he said, well, okay, tell me about it. We told him we're doing 2 million revenue. And we said, do you think we could get, or like 1.5, do you think we could get $6 million for this? And he said, yeah, maybe. Why? And we said, well, the way we think about it, if we sell the company for 6, and after taxes and stuff, and like paying some employees and stuff like that, we'd end up with 3, and each of us would get 1 million, and we'd be millionaires. And so that was it. And he said, well, then what would you do? And I said, well, if we were millionaires and we had that money, we could take that and go start a company, and it would like be an awesome company and things like that. And he's like, well, you already have a company. And he's like, and by the way, it's really hard to get to where you've gotten, because we had like millions of free users signing up, every day for free. We weren't spending any money on marketing. He's like, it's not easy to build a platform like what you've built. He said, why don't you keep this, make this that new company? And we said, well, look, like we're broke. We haven't, we've been working on this for years. We're broke, like, and there's risk in doing that. Because he said you should raise money. And he said, look, when you have a company that's working like this and you raise money, you can take some money off the table. And so that's what we ended up doing. We raised 12 million. We took a small amount of that and gave it to ourselves. Nothing like we were millionaires or anything, but just enough that like even if all hell broke loose, like the shit hit the fan, it wouldn't have been a complete wipeout and a complete loss.
So you're referring to a secondary, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We did some secondary. Exactly. So some of it was used, yeah.
Yeah, but when a professional institutional investor comes in, makes an investment, most of the money is used to grow the business, but you negotiated a secondary so that went into your pockets. Can I ask how much of that, how much the secondary was?
We took about, out of the 12, it was less than 2 of it for all the employees.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
It was a small amount.
At that point, you're putting some money in your jeans. Most of your everyday needs are met, and if everything goes pear-shaped, you've still got a little bit out of it.
Yeah, you've got something. You can buy a house, right? We could afford a down payment. Like, I mean, we were literally like the year before that, me and my wife looked at a bank statement. We had like $16 in it one day. Like it was just like we just had no money.
You're the brokest Harvard grad I've ever married.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, in law, like I was on financial aid in law school. I mean, like I just didn't come from money, didn't have any money.
So you raise this money. How does the business change as a result of having $12 million in the bank or 10?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that they did, the investors told us, is you now need to build an executive team, right? Because before that was just kind of like us and people we hired to help with stuff. And that's not like a skill you learn as a 20-year-old, right? Or whatever. I was maybe 20. Well, now I would have been 25 at the time. I made a lot of mistakes, actually. Like what do I do? You look at resumes and you say, oh, this person worked here, they worked there, they must be really good. And you start hiring people. You don't really know what questions to ask. But it changed. So now we had like a layer of management that then each of them wanted to start building their teams, right? Like when you take venture funding, the number one thing it's for usually is building out at an early stage is building out a team. And then it might also be for marketing. We never figured out paid marketing in the company. So it was more like to pay for building a team bigger than what you would normally do with the cash flow of the business. And then the second thing that happens is you start burning money as an org. So you go from being profitable to not being profitable. That's the point. Otherwise, you wouldn't have raised the money.
What was your pre-money valuation in your mind? So you're doing about $1.5 million in revenue.
Yeah.
You think if we could get 6, we could put 3 in our jeans. Do you remember roughly what the pre-money valuation?
Yeah. So it was a little later. So we had grown some since there. So maybe we were somewhere between 2 and 3 million in revenue when we were raising, and the pre-money, I think, was in the mid-20s. Actually. Wow. Yeah.
So still unbelievably, like that's a really big multiple on a couple or $3 million in revenue.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, yeah, so it was a Series A round. But then they also they were East Coast venture funds, and they put some pretty interesting participating preferred preferences on the deal, which I didn't understand the math of how that works, but ended up meaning that it would have been equivalent to a lower pre-money than that.
Can you explain what you mean by that? Again,
Yeah.
folks listening to this are going through this exact thing.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
trying to figure out.
it's super interesting to know. So a preference is when the investor says, okay, we're going to invest, but if you sell the company, we're going to get our money back first. So an example of that is you have, let's say they put $1 million in the company and they just have a normal preference. Then if you sell the company for 10 million, they get 1. If you sell the company for 1 million, they also get 1, you get 0, even if you own 90% of the company, right? So, sorry, if you sell it for 10, and let's say they own, we had to say what percent they own. Let's say they own 20%. They would get $2 million, right? So the preference doesn't come into play at all. But in the other case, if they sold it for 1, they're getting 100% of the value because they guaranteed get like up to $1 million first before anyone gets it. That's a normal preference. It's fairly standard. A participating preference says they always get their 1 first, and then they get their shares after that. So in that thing where that's 10 million, they would get 1, and now there's 9 left, and they would get 20% on that 9. So they'd get 2.8 in that deal, right? Versus just getting the 20%, which would be 2. In our case, we had a participating preference with a multiple and with interest on it. So it was a 3x liquidation preference that was participating, which means we put 12 million in. They put 12 million in. Okay. Then there was interest on it. So by the time we sold the company, it was 17. But they had a 3x participating preference on that. So it was 3 times that amount was what they ended up getting as a guaranteed amount. And so it was like pretty, they ended up, their guaranteed amount was like pretty good. And then, they shared
$50 million.
Yeah, they got exactly. Yeah. They didn't own 50% of the company, but they got like, almost that much of the deal.
Okay, that's blowing my mind. That's crazy. So 3x, they had a 3x participating preference.
Yeah.
Plus interest. So
Plus interest.
12 in.
Yeah.
Interest is at 17 by the time the deal is done 5 years later.
Yeah, and the interest multiplied by 3 too. Yeah. We'd only realized it at the time of the sale, but that was the deal we had signed, and so it was what it was.